Mark Wahlberg shocks the court with secret tapes of Puff Daddy, revealing a shocking and unexpected twist in the ongoing legal drama. Viewer discretion is strongly advised, as what you're about to hear comes directly from the federal trial against Shawn-Diddy-Combs, as reported by Inner City Press. The trial had already shifted into dangerous territory after the Ashton Kutcher revelations and Kylie Jenner's unexpected entry into the narrative. However, the courtroom was unprepared for what would happen next. When Mark Wahlberg entered the courthouse, the press barely believed it. The gallery erupted, paparazzi were caught off guard, and even court security tightened their positions. As Wahlberg, a Hollywood A-list star, producer, devout Catholic, former rapper, and lifelong Bostonian, walked through the double doors in a dark suit, holding a black leather satchel, and avoiding eye contact with the press pool, the room immediately quieted. As Mark Wahlberg took the stand, he didn't wait for the bailiff to ask him to speak. Instead, he declared, "I'm not here to protect anybody, I'm here because something happened, and I saw it. I recorded it, and it's time people knew." This bold statement set the tone for the rest of his testimony, which would soon unravel a web of secrets surrounding one of the music industry's most prominent figures. Judge Reyes raised an eyebrow, intrigued by the gravity of Wahlberg's words, and motioned for Ada Kelsey Monroe to proceed with the questioning. Monroe began by asking Wahlberg to state his connection to the defendant. He recounted meeting Sean Combs in the early 2000s, during a period when he was trying to distance himself from the old image associated with the Marky Mark days. They crossed paths on various circuits, including fashion shows, endorsements, and nightclub events. Eventually, both found themselves invited to what Combs referred to as executive retreats, business events that often blurred the lines between legitimate gatherings and more clandestine activities. Wahlberg described these retreats as having a dual nature, where some were indeed business-oriented while others hinted at something more sinister. Wahlberg reached down into his leather satchel, pulling out a flash drive. He explained that the contents came from an old hard drive stored in a temperature-controlled unit in Nevada, which he hadn't looked at in years. When the news of Diddy's arrest broke, followed by the testimonies of Ashton Kutcher and the surfacing of Kylie Jenner's footage, something clicked for Wahlberg. He realized that what he had witnessed wasn't just a fleeting moment but a pattern that needed to be exposed. His decision to come forward was not made lightly, it was driven by a sense of responsibility and the belief that silence was no longer an option. Judge Reyes ordered the footage to be reviewed in her private chambers before being presented in court. The courtroom recessed, and inside those chambers, the contents of the flash drive stunned even the most battle-hardened legal staff. When court resumed, the video was queued up, and the atmosphere in the gallery was electric. No one dared to breathe as the footage played, capturing a dimly lit lounge space in an upscale setting along the coast. The scene unfolded with laughter, and the camera zoomed slightly to reveal a group of men seated on a long velvet sofa. At the center was Diddy, holding a cigar, flanked by two other men whose faces were blurred. One of them whispered in Diddy's ear, and then Diddy leaned forward, stating, "They don't get to leave until we say so." The gasps that echoed through the courtroom were palpable, and Monroe pressed on, asking Wahlberg where this event took place. He recalled the Hamptons in August 2008, describing it as an after-party following a charity auction. Attendees were told it was a closed celebration, VIP only, but once they arrived, phones were collected, NDAs were signed, and security was locked down tightly. The implications of such measures were clear: whatever transpired that night was meant to remain hidden from public view. Monroe continued to probe, asking why Wahlberg chose to record the event. He explained that it felt wrong from the outset. While he couldn't pinpoint exactly what was amiss, he sensed an unsettling atmosphere that compelled him to document the proceedings. His intention was not to incriminate but to preserve a truth that he feared might otherwise be lost. In the second clip, the footage jumped to another angle, showcasing a hallway where two women, visibly intoxicated, were being led down the corridor by a man in a black hoodie. Diddy appeared behind them, speaking quietly, and the audio was grainy, but one phrase stood out clearly audible: "Get them in the room. I want everything on camera." The tension in the courtroom was thick as Wahlberg recounted the haunting memory of that night. He admitted that after leaving the event, he never attended another similar gathering. The memories of that night haunted him, and he struggled with the decision to remain silent for so long. Monroe asked why he didn't come forward earlier, and Wahlberg's voice dropped as he revealed the fear that had kept him quiet. He acknowledged that he had seen people disappear, individuals who spoke out and suddenly lost jobs, faced bad press, or vanished from the scene altogether. With a family to protect, Wahlberg chose silence, hoping to forget the disturbing images that lingered in his mind. However, the weight of those memories became unbearable, prompting him to take action. When the opportunity arose, he felt compelled to share what he had witnessed. As he testified, he emphasized that he wasn't seeking revenge but rather aimed to shed light on a system that had allowed such behavior to persist unchecked. He turned to Diddy, addressing him directly. "You remember that night? You know what was on those tapes and what you did?" Diddy remained motionless, arms crossed, his face red with emotion, not uttering a single word since Wahlberg began speaking. Monroe concluded her questioning by requesting additional security for Wahlberg and issuing subpoenas for 3 individuals referenced in the background of the video clips. Judge Reyes agreed, recognizing the significance of the evidence presented. As the court adjourned, headlines outside began to swirl, and the public was left grappling with the implications of Wahlberg's testimony. The revelation of secret recordings and the potential for further evidence to emerge left many questions hanging in the air, particularly regarding who else might have footage they hadn't yet released. The courtroom was now a focal point of intrigue, with the stakes higher than ever as the trial moved forward into uncharted territory. As the courtroom settled into its new reality, the focus shifted to the conversations that had taken place beyond the immediate scope of the taped events. Wahlberg revealed that he had overheard a conversation between Diddy and a manager-type figure at a fashion event in Los Angeles several years later. The discussion centered around leverage, and one line struck Wahlberg deeply: "She was never supposed to be caught on cam. We claimed it, but I still got the originals." This exchange hinted at a broader network of influence and control that extended far beyond the initial incident. Wahlberg couldn't confirm who the she was, but the mention of originals suggested that there were multiple layers of documentation, perhaps even alternative versions of events that could be used to manipulate narratives or exert pressure. Monroe pressed further, asking if Wahlberg was aware of any other recordings. He hesitated, acknowledging that while he had only made one recording personally, he knew there were others. Diddy had a habit of documenting everything, ostensibly for memoirs, but Wahlberg interpreted this practice as a form of insurance, a way to hold power over others. The idea of blackmail loomed large in the courtroom, with the implication that these recordings could be leveraged against anyone who posed a threat to Diddy's interests. It was a chilling realization that painted a picture of a man who thrived on secrecy and control, using the very tools of modern communication to maintain his grip on those around him. The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as Monroe leaned in closer to Wahlberg, inquiring if he believed Kylie Jenner was part of this ecosystem. Wahlberg nodded slowly, recalling a specific instance where he overheard Diddy discussing leverage with the same manager-type figure. The conversation included a cryptic reference to a Keurig problem, a term that initially seemed fabricated but now resonated with the gravity of the situation. Wahlberg admitted that he remembered that word vividly, as it sounded like something conjured from thin air. Yet, in the context of the trial, it began to make sense as a coded language used to describe the manipulation of vulnerable individuals, particularly those in the spotlight. Diddy sat motionless throughout this exchange, his arms crossed, face flushed with a mix of anger and disbelief. He hadn't said a word since Wahlberg began his testimony, not even a whisper of protest or denial. His lawyers, however, were frantically scribbling notes, likely strategizing how to counter the mounting evidence against their client. The contrast between Diddy's stoic demeanor and the fervent activity of his legal team highlighted the tension in the room. It was as if the walls themselves were closing in, with each piece of evidence presented by Wahlberg adding to the pressure that Diddy now faced. Monroe turned to the judge, emphasizing the relevance of the footage not merely as historical evidence but as a systemic issue. She argued that the existence of these recordings demonstrated that as far back as 2008, Diddy had been actively documenting private encounters, wielding access as a weapon and orchestrating situations like a chess game. The judge, recognizing the gravity of the situation, agreed with Monroe's assessment, noting that the witness had provided physical evidence previously unknown to the court, which had been verified for authenticity. The courtroom held its breath as the next twist emerged. Monroe requested permission to play a voicemail that Wahlberg had retrieved during the drive review. The message, left shortly after the 2008 Hamptons event, featured a muffled male voice warning, "You didn't see anything. Don't talk. It's just business. You know how this goes." The number was blocked, and the voice was altered, but Wahlberg insisted he recognized it as Diddy's. He described the tone as one that conveyed a smile while issuing a threat, a chilling reminder of the power dynamics at play. As the voicemail played, the judge inquired if Wahlberg had received any follow-ups after receiving the message. He confirmed that his manager had been offered a production deal through a company linked to Diddy 2 weeks later. When they declined, a smear campaign ensued, with a blog claiming that Wahlberg was difficult to work with and another piece leaking an old arrest from his teenage years. It was a calculated move designed to intimidate and silence, and Wahlberg understood the message: stay quiet or face the consequences. As the session drew to a close, Wahlberg leaned into the microphone, stating, "I didn't come here for revenge. I came here because I know what it feels like to keep secrets, and because I have daughters. If even a fraction of what these other witnesses are saying is true, and if people like Kylie Jenner, Cassie Ventura, and God knows who else were caught up in this system, then silence is no longer an option." He turned to Diddy for the first time, challenging him directly, "You remember that night? You know what was on those tapes and what you did?" Diddy remained silent, his expression unreadable, as the weight of Wahlberg's words hung in the air. The courtroom was now a crucible of emotions, with the stakes rising higher than ever. As Monroe closed with a motion to place Wahlberg's drive under federal protection, request additional security, and issue subpoenas for 3 individuals referenced in the background of the video clips, the judge nodded in agreement. The headlines outside were already spinning out of control, with the public clamoring for more information about the alleged misconduct and the potential fallout for all involved. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was charged with uncertainty. The question that lingered in the air was whether Wahlberg's decision to come forward would lead to further revelations or if it would be met with resistance from those who sought to protect the status quo. The implications of his testimony extended beyond the trial itself, raising critical questions about the culture of secrecy and exploitation within the entertainment industry. As the court prepared to adjourn for the day, the audience was left with a profound sense of anticipation, knowing that the story was far from over and that the true extent of the scandal awaited further exploration. As the trial progressed, the narrative deepened, revealing the intricate systems that had been put in place to facilitate the events that Wahlberg had witnessed. Kelsey Monroe adjusted her tone, signaling a shift in the courtroom atmosphere. The tension that had previously pulsed through the air now transformed into a palpable urgency as she approached Wahlberg with a series of pointed questions. "Mr. Wahlberg," she began carefully, "did Mr. Combs ever imply that he had footage of other individuals stored or used for influence?" The room fell silent, every juror leaning forward, captivated by the unfolding drama. Wahlberg took a slow breath, collecting his thoughts. "Yes," he replied, "on more than one occasion, but there's one conversation I remember specifically." He paused, allowing the weight of his words to settle. "It was late 2011. We were both in Miami for Art Basel. He was hosting an after-event, a small circle of maybe 15 people tops, producers, models, a few high-profile artists. He pulled me aside and said, 'You ever want to keep people in line? You don't need muscle, you just need memories.'" The jurors exchanged glances, the implications of his words sinking in. Wahlberg continued, caught on camera. "I thought he was being philosophical. I laughed it off, but then he said, 'I don't forget anything. That's why they don't cross me.'" Monroe paused, allowing the gravity of the situation to permeate the courtroom. She then asked, "Did he ever show you footage from those tapes?" Wahlberg shook his head, "No, but he described them. He once told me, 'You'd be shocked who shows their real face when they think no one's watching.'" The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as the jurors began to grasp the depth of the system at play. Then came the moment that shattered the courtroom's atmosphere again. Monroe submitted a forensic document, a digital index pulled from the library server seized during the raid. This document included a partial list of labeled files from a folder ominously titled Cold Cases. The list contained code names, event dates, and corresponding tags. Several names were redacted, but one stood out prominently and boldly: K. Jenner, Velvet Axis. Monroe turned to Wahlberg, asking, "Do you recognize that name?" Wahlberg nodded, his expression grave. "That's Kylie," he said, "and I know what Velvet Axis meant. That meant restricted visuals, limited mobility, special clearance." The implications were staggering. Kylie wasn't just a guest but rather a participant in a meticulously orchestrated system. Monroe continued, "So she wasn't just brought to be seen, she was assigned a role." Wahlberg replied, "Exactly. People had roles, colors, levels. Some were brought to be seen, others to be used. Kylie was brought to be seen but not to know what she was seeing." The judge, observing the intensity of the exchange, listened intently, her arms crossed as she absorbed the information. Wahlberg looked over at Diddy again, his gaze steady and resolute. "And there's something else," he added, "there were other tapes." Monroe pressed further, "Whose tapes?" Wahlberg responded, "Other celebrities. I won't say names, I can't confirm, but I heard him brag about holding footage of people doing things they wouldn't want out." He continued, "One night he said, they all come to my house, they all sign, and they all forget the cameras are mine." The courtroom fell silent, the weight of his words hanging heavily in the air. Monroe stepped forward, ready to present Exhibit 237, an internal memo recovered from the estate's encrypto communications. It was a schedule from 2019, the same date as Kylie Jenner's appearance at Home Hills. The screen lit up with a color-coded list, each name accompanied by a handler, time slot, room assignment, and camera path. Red, gold, white, and black, each color representing a different level of access and control. Kylie's line was highlighted, indicating her handler, location, mirroring status, and observation without consent. One juror gasped as the courtroom was locked in stillness, absorbing the implications of the data laid before them. Monroe read a footnote at the bottom of the page, which stated, "Observer profiles to be used for future leverage. No outbound access granted. Secure via Tunnel 3 if necessary." The courtroom was now a microcosm of anxiety and anticipation, with the jurors processing the information while Diddy remained silent, his expression inscrutable. "Mr. Wahlberg," Monroe asked, "did Mr. Combs ever mention using underground routes or hidden passageways in his properties?" Wahlberg answered without hesitation, "Yes. He once joked about the rat tunnels. I thought it was just bravado, but now I understand." He elaborated, "You can walk someone in, walk them out the other side, and no one even knows they were there." The concept of hidden pathways and secret rooms began to crystallize in the minds of the jurors, painting a picture of a man who had created an entire infrastructure designed for control and manipulation. A new witness was brought forward, Vincent Perez, a former architecture consultant hired for renovations on the Holmby Hills property. When asked if he was aware of Tunnel 3, Perez confirmed, "Yes, I designed the floor plans, but the tunnel layouts were already there. My job was to update ventilation and lighting." He wanted soundproofing, no echoes, absolute silence. Monroe pressed further, "Did you ask why?" Perez replied, "He said it was for meditation, but he paid in cash and made me sign a full NDA." Monroe continued, "Did you ever see the mirror wing?" Perez hesitated, "Only once. It wasn't on the official blueprints." "What did it look like?" Perez described it as resembling a performance space, with mirrors on all sides, red floors, and minimal furniture except for a bench and a ceiling rig. "Could have been for lights or cameras," he speculated, "I don't know." The implications of the design choices were clear. The space was engineered for surveillance and control, a stark contrast to the opulent facade that masked its darker purpose. Hastings, Diddy's lead attorney, objected on the basis of irrelevance, but Judge Reyes overruled the objection. "We're not speculating, we're describing verified architecture," she asserted, reinforcing the legitimacy of the evidence presented. The next exhibit further dismantled any illusion of coincidence, a WhatsApp backup showing a message from Diddy to an unnamed contact, timestamped just hours after Kylie Jenner's footage was taken. The message read, "Got the footage. K looks good. Going to sit on this." Wahlberg was asked if that voice matched what he remembered, and he affirmed, "Absolutely. That's him." Then came a second message, "She don't even remember. Trust me. Just need to make sure her team never finds out." The courtroom went completely silent, even the marshal standing near the exit looked stunned. Monroe rested her hand on the table, turning to Wahlberg. "Mr. Wahlberg, did you ever confront Mr. Combs about any of this?" Wahlberg nodded once. It was brief. "I asked him why he needed to record people without telling them. He said, because that's the only time you see who they really are. I asked what he planned to do with it. He said, nothing until I need to. And now that this trial is public," Wahlberg's voice dropped, "I think this is when he needs to." Judge Reyes recessed the session to review additional exhibits, but as Wahlberg stepped off the stand, he looked out at the gallery and said something not into the mic but loud enough for everyone to hear, "If you ever went to one of those parties, you might be on those tapes." The press lost it, and the courtroom doors flew open as headlines erupted. Wahlberg's revelation of using footage as insurance, combined with the existence of secret rooms, tunnels, and Kylie being tagged as leverage, marked a pivotal moment in the trial. The Hollywood vault of secrets had just opened, and the jury sat in shock, blinking slowly as if trying to process the magnitude of what had just been revealed. Now, the focus shifted from whether Diddy had done something to how many people had helped him do it, how long they had stayed quiet, and how deep the tapes really went. The courtroom was no longer just a venue for legal proceedings, it had become a battleground for truth and accountability, with the fate of many intertwined in the outcome of this trial.